Hi, and welcome to the 65th TiddlyWiki Hangout. I'm Jeremy Ruston, the inventor of TiddlyWiki, and I'm joined on today's Hangout from left to right on my screen, first by Alex. Alex, would you like to say hi and where you're from and something about your involvement with TiddlyWiki?
Yeah, hello.
Hi, Alex, we can hear you.
Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, I'm in Stockport near Manchester in the UK. Been involved or a fan of TiddlyWiki for quite some time, and just trying to combine my sketchbook with a TiddlyWiki. So I've been using a sketchbook. It's something like.
Okay, a sketchbook, right.
It's got lots of circles and kind of watercolored type bleed. I like this idea of visualizing borders which are bleeding. So I want to see if I can wikify my sketchbook, and part of that is trying to recreate some of the type of borders which I've sort of color coded my things that I've circled, etc. You know. So I'd like to sort of transfer the sort of visual language, I suppose, from a sketchbook into TiddlyWiki. So that's what I'm on at the moment.
Great, thanks very much for joining us, Alex. I'm sure we'll hear more from you in a minute. Eric, would you like to say hi, where you're from, and something about your involvement with TiddlyWiki?
Oh, my camera is not working properly, but my mic is, so I'll just do the microphone part here. Hi, my name is Eric Schulman. I'm author of Tiddly Tools, Small Tools for Big Ideas, and lead developer for TiddlyWiki Classic. And I'm based in Silicon Valley.
Indeed. Great you could join us, Eric. Thanks very much. Mario, would you like to say hi? And the same routine as usual.
Yeah, hi folks, my name is Mario Fitsch from Austria, near Salzburg, contributor to TiddlyWiki Classic with themes and plugins, and with TiddlyWiki 5, different stuff, mainly translations at the moment.
Indeed. Great that you could join us, Mario. Thanks very much. And finally, Ton, would you like to say hi and where you're from and something about your involvement with TiddlyWiki?
Hi, my name is Ton Gerner from Dordrecht in the Netherlands, long-time user of TiddlyWiki, and about a year now with working with TiddlyWiki 5, making some guides about the layout of TiddlyWiki 5.
Indeed. Great that you could join us, Ton. Thank you very much. So this time we don't have any questions in the Q&A app, and I'd encourage anybody watching, if you do have any questions, do put them into the Q&A app. That's incredibly helpful. But we do have a question from Alex, who wanted to talk about borders and border images. And I know, Alex, that you'd posted to the group a question about a sort of CSS aspect of this, trying to something about border images. But I guess from your introduction that you've got some deeper purpose in mind than just understanding the CSS.
Well, yeah, I've created this notebook, so starting off with mind mapping, but then trying to develop my own diagramming style, I suppose. And I've used it to take notes in meetings, meeting people, just playing around with ideas. And I sort of like the idea of them both working together. A sort of transmedia type scenario, you know, so that they both inform each other.
Indeed. Yeah.
When I'm a long-time TiddlyWiki user, and when I'm writing, I've kind of written it with the idea. I've created my drawings and diagrams, whatever, with the idea that they would one day be wikied.
Yes.
You know, so rather than when you with colour on paper, you could just tag some. You can draw a ring round it, and it's tagged. Or you draw it close to something, and it's tagged. Or you can, draw a line and it connects it.
Indeed.
So I'm trying to sort of think about how that language.
Funnily enough, it intersects with some of my thoughts recently, which is also as you know, talk about it a fair amount on here. I'm very interested in how we visualize ideas and sort of ways of visualizing relationships between ideas that sufficiently mirror the way that we might see these things in our heads, that they make good user interfaces. And you'll have remembered me ranting many times about not hating, but being very disappointed by the fact that in my head I think it's very easy to see lots of little boxes with lines in between them as a way of visualizing the relationships between a bunch of things. But I found in practice that software that tries to do that is very unsatisfactory. That what the brain perceives primarily is often artifacts about the layout of this graph rather than information that you're trying to convey. And with that background out of the way, what I was going to say is that a recent thought is the realization, really, that I think I'm explicitly interested in showing hierarchies and other relationships by containment rather than by linkage lines. And I think that's, it took me a long time to get there, but that was the thing that related to what you were saying, how in the sketchbooks you may also be using lines to express relationships. But that you've got containment relationships as one of the primary ways.
Yeah, that's one of the things and I do copy one of the ways I think there's called the variable system model, and it has a particular way it has a notation, I suppose, of showing contained.
Can you show us what that notation looks like?
Wow.
Can you screen share?
I think it's going to show something in the camera, in fact. Yeah, brilliant.
Oh, this is difficult. It's going to be tricky. Well.
Is there roughly a series of boxes inside a larger box?
Well, if you've got something in your in a box and you just draw a line, you explode it. So you have rather than trying to draw it inside.
Okay, so it's a notation for.
You draw a line and then explode it and amplify it, so it's bigger.
Yeah. So because of I might put this as because of the limitations of paper, it's a way of having small content inside an object and then calling it out so that it's big enough to draw.
Yeah. So you can. Yeah. So you've got a cloudy environment. You've got everything which is unsorted is in a cloud. Anything that's a little bit more sorted is a circle. And the environment contains lots of little circles, but you draw them outside. You draw them alongside the environment. You don't try and zoom into it. You say that, well, that's that's in there. You make a connection to the environment, but then just say, okay, amplify it. There it is. That's a circle. So that's one of the things which so it gets away from zooming.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which isn't so practical with paper.
Yeah. Well, and I suppose also, it's just a way of that is one of the ways, I suppose. And the traditional there's this traditional representation of a viable system model, which I'll put in the side there. I'm not sure if that makes it any clearer or not.
I'm screen sharing now, so let me go and look. Let's just look at this diagram. Okay, I can see some exploding things there. No, those are just clouds.
Yeah. So you've got your clouds. You got your clouds. You see that one with the diagram with the clouds there. Say, for example, that one that's system 4. That's actually inside that cloud.
Okay.
And then
is it that empty arrow that conveys that relationship, or the zigzag one?
It's both of those arrows. One's an amplifying arrow, one's an attenuating arrow. I think they're borrowed from electronics.
I see.
Here is that they sort of form an equilibrium in terms of their complexity.
I see.
And then you have mechanisms which regulate complexity or amplify complexity.
How interesting, yes. Yes.
So it's a way of thinking about organisations and organisation itself. So TiddlyWiki is a sort of, a major this and TiddlyWiki are kind of major muses in my thinking about organising things. I'm not sure how useful that.
Well, I mean, it does reflect
the
software. I think we talked last time about my fascination with using TiddlyWiki as a general tool for working in notations, and you've just given us a great example. This is a notation called a sequence diagram, and a bit of software that I haven't managed to integrate with TiddlyWiki yet,
nice.
that automatically, how do I make it do it? Perhaps that's because.
Well, that's interesting.
There we go. But I love that kind of kind of interactive production of complex notation that allows your brain to shift between stuff which you can copy and paste and kind of manipulate in a texty and stuff that you can perceive and understand. So that's one bit. But of course, the thing I'd notice is that for any particular type of diagram, there's quite a lot of logic implicit in that diagram layout, and so I think it would be a real challenge to make a VSM diagram generator that didn't require somebody who was both a VSM expert and a JavaScript expert.
Well, that diagram there is, that's I'm not trying to model that at all. It's just to say that.
Yes, sorry, I did appreciate that isn't your goal here.
Extracting things from the cloud. So if I've got this sort of cloud where things are not very organised, and then I organise something a little bit, I put it in a circle.
No, I did say
So the clouds sort of lots of.
You're evolving your own notation, which borrows something from.
Yeah.
But the goal with that kind of notational stuff would be, I think, exactly that, for people to evolve their own dialect that suits their own way of working. In the same way that one can evolve one's own dialect of wiki text by adding global macros and plugins and so on.
I think the tags and links and tables and things like that. I think a lot of it for me at the moment is just rethinking how the standard sort of grammars and standard ways of organising in TiddlyWiki. How I've not experimented with them as much. Recently. I think giving things a look. If you put some of the cognitive load away from reading, I want to bring some visual colours to borders. I don't want to go crazy on colours, but just some pattern, from mapping really, and I've got these in my pad I use like a water brush, which is like a, use it for manga, and you sort of you can sort of get the sort of watercolor effects, and I'd like to photograph them and then use those images to bring a softness really to the software, which I think with the new embedding of images, I think it'll be a lot easier. Especially, you know, the drag and drop and everything like that, and the formatting of each tiddler based on a tag. I can then relate if I'm with somebody. What I found out with using, you know, a big book like this on a table, when I'm with somebody, it's a lot. It doesn't get in the way as much as a computer or an iPad. You know, the social bit of sharing and capturing is. I found that going back to the book a lot easier. But I'd like to be able to show them something on the screen which relates to. You know, I've had a conversation with them and I've drawn something and we've got some colours. Whatever. I'd like to kind of get it off the paper, because the paper's full now. You know, I want to fold it up into a wiki and expand the ideas, but I guess really I want to just bring some sort of hand-drawn aesthetics from using these the ability of TiddlyWiki to embed their own images, embed its own images, and then use them in experiment with it really. I've been doodling really for a year or so in a book, and I think I want to the way to TiddlyWiki.
I have an interesting question about the approach. One method would be to define your content as tiddlers with the conventional kind of relationships between them, links and transclusion and whatnot, and then apply styling to give them an appearance of your hand-drawn, you know, the hand-drawn semantics. So one way would be to start with a structured semantic content, TiddlyWiki style, and then apply, you know, appearances to it to convey the organization. The other way would be more of to have TiddlyWiki being almost a drawing tool, where that the tiddlers were created by, you know, laying them out visually and selecting colors for their edges. As you were suggesting, rather than choosing a tag, you would be picking a border color kind of a thing. So one way is to start from the TiddlyWiki semantic constructs and then apply CSS to it. But what you really are wanting is to be able to literally draw inside a TiddlyWiki and have those be interpreted as tiddlers and tags. Here, if I draw this box, that means make it a tiddler. If I add a color around the edges, it means put a tag on it. So you, in some sense, the power is to work visually as opposed to working semantically and then applying a visual presentation.
I wasn't, Eric. I think over the years I've tried lots of. I think I'm of the conclusion, which I don't want to try and replicate the book. I want them to work together and inform each other. I think.
Well, that's there is something I've been doing recently that relates to this, which is I did some diagrams about TiddlyWiki for the TalkyTalky site. So that's these things. And there's that one, and sorry, just coming up is this one, and the similarity, Alex, is that I first of all drew this bit that I'm circling with the mouse, so up to the thing that says DOM or fake DOM. And that completely filled the piece of paper that I drew it on, and then I photographed it with my phone, and then I converted it to an SVG. So it's a what do you call it? It's a vector image, and it
Yeah.
scales nicely and prints nicely.
Yeah.
So that's one part. That's a tiny bit what you're talking about. Being able to scan something by converting it into an SVG, which you can simplify and smooth and so on. You can get it quite small, a lot smaller than the equivalent bitmap would be. But the bit that's funny is that a while later I realized that the diagram needed this bit on the end, and so I drew that separately and digitally added it in post-production.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I picked up that I think we maybe both find interesting. Being able to kick something off on paper, but then being able to refactor it in software.
It might be a case for refactoring it in something like Photoshop before you actually bring it into your TiddlyWiki.
Yeah,
Jeremy.
it depends on. I mean, you could imagine refactoring it to the point where each of these elements was a separate tiddler that was transcluded.
Yeah.
So that the same elements could be reused in other combinations in other diagrams. Eric, I'm so sorry I interrupted you.
No, quite all right. I was thinking more along the lines of that once you have the image imported in parts or as a big slab, that using something like the image map technology to make clickable hot zones that are linked to tiddlers.
Yeah, I mean, I prefer working in SVG because SVG, you can make entire elements.
Well, whether just SVG
yes,
or image map, it's the same idea of having clickable hot zones on your illustration, so that a kind of a halfway mechanism would be you would take your drawing, which you do on paper, and then scan it in as an image, as an SVG, and then have some interactive process of drawing a rectangle around a piece of it and then saying that's tied to a tiddler or something.
Yeah.
That would be halfway. It wouldn't be quite fully, but it would be part of the way that you would have an illustration that was linked in that way.
A while ago, I think we had something like that on Tiddly Space with this SGVs, and because it is possible, isn't it, on SGV to define a button in a SGV? Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, I'm just finding the docs, but there's an example of a wiki text, of an SVG with a link in it in tiddlywiki.com, in fact. And yes, so you can take any old shape and turn it into a link with an SVG.
Yeah.
Okay, I will. Let's move on a little. I'm sure that in the nature of Hangouts, the same topics. Oh, Alex, we haven't answered your original question. Is a fairly straightforward one about using bitmaps inside style sheets. I can show you how it's done, but I think we'll Mario or me or somebody will answer on the group. So I'll just find an example. Oh, actually, that won't do. What's the theme with a bitmap background called? Starlight, isn't it? Right, so sorry. This is the syntax that I was going to show you, Alex. Let me increase the font to make sure.
Okay, yeah, data URI.
Yeah, so you got the data URI macro with its double-angled brackets that takes the title of a tiddler. So that's the tiddler containing the image. I mean, in this case, it's a font, but it's the same technique.
Yes.
And that gets substituted for the base 64 representation of that tiddler. So you just wrap it around it, the URL or whatever the content is.
Data URI.
I don't know if your style sheet already has that on the top of it, but have you come across that? Anyway, let me. I can post a link. Alex.
Yeah, I posted that. Yeah, post a link, Jeremy. That'd be good. Okay.
Alex, link. Oops, coming up. It's a GitHub link, Alex, but hopefully you'll be able to extract the bits that you need. But we'll answer on the group as well, so that the answer's there for people in the future too. Now, there was another topic that I think Mario suggested that might be worth a discussion.
One short thing. I have posted a link also for the Mozilla Developer Network.
Okay.
There is some information about data URIs.
Okay, as background.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I think Mario suggested that we might have a quick look at this. So this is a posting to the TiddlyWiki group earlier today, I think, yes. And it's from a member of the group drawing our attention to this, the Global Learning X Prize. The summary from Richard, who posted this, was that it's a global competition to build an autonomous instructional platform to be deployed on Android tablets to the world's poorest children that will teach basic numeracy and literacy. And Richard's posting because I guess essentially he's wondering whether TiddlyWiki could be a solution to that platform. So I think, yeah. So I don't know, we could throw this open first. I've certainly got some thoughts about it. Mario, I think you originally raised it. What were your thoughts?
I think what will come up is a lot of let's say suggestions where you have a server side and client side possibilities. But I think what's needed in if you are somewhere in the world where you don't have any internet connection, basically something like similar to TiddlyWiki. So if you have a real file-based solution, I think you have a good chance here because it scales without any backend, without any money that's needed to keep it alive. And I think this is it would be a very good approach with TiddlyWiki on a file-based solution.
Yeah, that's. I'd echo that. One of the things I think that, if I understand correctly, this is about the kids learning to make things with TiddlyWiki. Is that how you interpret it? So it's
no. I think what they want is some let's say learning concepts. So you have to create the software that teaches the children to read and to for mathematics and this stuff. But TiddlyWiki can be a platform to support it. So it's not that they should know how TiddlyWiki works. They should learn how to calculate, how to read, how to write
and so people
in a funny and engaging way, I think.
And people who did know TiddlyWiki would be creating these interactive lessons as TiddlyWikis.
Yes, so someone or the community can create the lessons. Then you need of course internet access to download the stuff. But as soon as you have it, everything can be in one file, so there is no need to have server connection anymore.
I did a little bit of student work back in the university on what are called authoring systems for formal educational environments. And basically, there's a couple of kinds of mechanisms that are needed. You need to be able to create a lesson, which is a sequence of activities. And then you need to have ways of having certain kind of mechanisms in that sequence, such as repeating instruction if it was unclear, going back for remedial work, being able to do tests and verify that somebody has attained a certain level of skill before they move on to the next thing. These are the basic mechanisms of instruction, regardless of the mechanism for delivering it. Of course, TiddlyWiki is essentially web technology, and so you can say anything that you can do in a web page, you can sort of do in a TiddlyWiki in terms of grouping information and linking and transitioning. And so I think that the goal for a X Prize qualifying TiddlyWiki would be a sort of a framework for people to create educational sequences, but that the author would not be TiddlyWiki proficient. They would rather be proficient in educational design, in understanding the nature of creating instructional sequences and testing and looping through and remedial instruction, etc., and that those kinds of activities, there would be mechanisms built into the TiddlyWiki that would, into a customized TiddlyWiki that would support creating those kinds of activity sequences from an educational theory standpoint rather than a TiddlyWiki authoring standpoint, and that it's really about taking a tool that could be targeted to educational designers and allowing them in their own manner to create educational content that would automatically be TiddlyWikified into a very well-packaged presentation for the children.
Yes,
So
that's right.
There's
So this is
a lot of
first.
potential there, but it's also quite a sophisticated problem. It's not merely a question of, oh, TiddlyWiki can do that. It's creating an educational tool is a very subtle thing.
Yeah, I know, but this is only the first step. So you have to have a framework that let's say the community can create lessons and this stuff, but then you have to create the framework so that the children get their own let's say version, which is then directly connected to the user, and this is the child. So you have to have a measurement about the success. So you have to have the structure, and then you have to measure. You have to make some tests, and then I think that there is also needed some rewards. For example, I would like to have what is it? It's called gamified version, so that the learning should be fun. So there should be somehow there should be a point where the children says, okay, I want to pass these 5 tests because then I get new content and I get the new game, for example. And that would be the real challenge, I think. So that make it fun for the children, that they really try to learn what they want to learn, and they get new content. Or they try to get new content because they get the new game with the content or something like this.
Right. Well, not even just new games, but even the one thing that's very common on Android and other sort of tablet games is the idea of in-game upgrades, often done by actual spending of money. And you hear about people spending hundreds of dollars on Candy Crush because they were paying their way through. But the idea of in-game upgrades is already a familiar concept to a lot of younger people, that this is how a game is done. You buy a game and then you earn the extra unlocks within the game.
Right. Yeah.
So the same kind of gamifying could be done
in this case, if you pass a test, then you unlock the new content. So you have the possibility to get new content, and the new content in normal cases has some new features, and if it's gamified, then it has a new game that should be fun to play. And the game itself teaches the lessons that's needed to pass the next test, and to get the new content.
So I would think that in order to even sort of begin to look at this X Prize, you know, sort of in any sort of serious way, we would have to have the involvement of some educational designers as opposed to software folk. You know, that it's not merely about TiddlyWiki, it's about what is the right way to, you know, to create an instructional system. Regardless of the technology that's used to deliver it, it's about, you know, creating the instructional pattern as opposed to the data pattern.
Yeah, I am a educator, so I've I don't know, I have a university study about train the trainers, so I know a little bit about trainings and create this stuff also for trainers. And yeah, I think it would be really interesting to go. And there is a lot of time, so there is 6 months about for signing up or building a team. Then there is 18 months to build the software, and then if you are in the last 5 teams that will get selected, then you get $1 million for field testing. So you really have to test it with children. And as I saw it, it's about 3,000 children, so it's a small community where English is a main teaching language. And then you have to have the possibility to support your content and also to measure how they are doing, because at the end, the children that did best, the team gets the final prize. And this is about $10 million for creating a worldwide system with all this stuff. So I think it would be really nice and really interesting project.
Okay,
but it's also, I think it's a full-time project. So if you really want to win.
So scanning through the materials on the website, there's a $500 joining fee registration.
But not always. But I think this is not really a problem.
No, it's but I can see, and as you said, it's a very time-consuming and intensive competition. And as Eric said, I would agree that a successful team, I could readily imagine a successful team using TiddlyWiki, but there would have to be a lot more expertise than just TiddlyWiki on the team.
Yes, absolutely.
But it's interesting. I mean, I do honestly think TiddlyWiki could be an amazing solution in that context for decentralized learning. I can readily dream up mechanisms whereby the standalone TiddlyWiki could phone home when it can to deliver results, and you can imagine kind of encryption schemes, signing schemes that would allow give the child confirmation that their results had been accepted, you know, and all that kind of thing. But I do wonder if TiddlyWiki would be recognized as a solution by people. When you look at the PDF of their rules, it's you know, it's an awful thick corporate PDF. I just have a funny feeling that people often have a fixed idea of what they expect the solution to look like, and I wonder whether a TiddlyWiki-based solution would just look too weird to people. And of course, it would have a TiddlyWiki-based solution would have characteristics that I think, from a conventional perspective, might occasionally be regarded as disadvantages. You know, the fact that a child can hack the HTML file to make it say and do something different, that might well be perceived by a more sort of centrally minded person as being a disadvantage.
Jeremy, the target that was in the email said it was targeting at Android platform, and as you know, I'm beginning work on a project which is to take TiddlyWiki and encapsulate it for Android. So the encapsulation might be the response to the sort of hackability aspect.
Yeah, and what's the problem if they hack the TiddlyWiki?
I don't think there is a problem.
It's about learning. Yeah, it's about learning, and if they if they go into the core of TiddlyWiki and change it in that way, it would be.
My concern isn't that I'm worried about that. It's that you know, my experience with TiddlyWiki in the wider world is that people find it very peculiar and find it very hard to get their heads around it. And if they've got a background in the conventional ways of doing the kinds of things that TiddlyWiki does, then they tend to see TiddlyWiki's design as embodying the most terrible characteristics, because if you come from a world where you've got server-based apps and your expectation is that backing up your database will back up your apps, then you're disappointed to see an app that doesn't have that characteristic. Nathan is saying understatement.
But I think backing up the stuff would be possible. But I think it would be a big win. So if it's for children for 6 to 12, I think. So if they start hacking TiddlyWiki,
I couldn't agree
give
more.
them a certificate that they have. I don't know that they don't need to learn.
And they can make lessons for themselves. No,
Yes, right.
I love that. The concern is that the kind of people who are involved in this project may well be expecting a more conventional based application that doesn't have that kind of freedom.
This is also not the problem, because you have the encryption mechanism, so you can sign the stuff, so you can see if they modify your scores and change it back again. So this is not really a problem.
Well,
Right.
it's not a problem. It's not a problem if I may. It's not a problem at a technical level, but if I may throw a term out there, people often see TiddlyWiki as being in the category of what's known as disruptive technology. That it changes the status quo of the relationship between people and their information, and so that educators, especially educational designers, tend to work in very formal and conventional systems of instruction, and that I think Jeremy's concern is that TiddlyWiki is positioned as a somewhat disruptive technology that threatens the formalized structure of these educational designers.
But I think you can hide this from those people. You can't hide the background of TiddlyWiki from the children. But I think it's really simple to hide it from those who will vote.
Mario, I think what Eric and Jeremy are kind of both sort of trying to say in this is that I think everybody on this call very much agrees with you. The problem is that anybody not on this call, or most people not on this call, aren't going to understand the things that we understand. And so it almost creates sort of this second uphill battle in even approaching that competition. I think
TiddlyWiki can be an application, so this is not the problem. There is 18 months of development, and I think this is not the problem. So containing the content and creating a framework that is really fun to work with for the children. So I think
I absolutely agree with that, and I think that you're correct. The problem is, not in building this thing out of TiddlyWiki, but then in subsequently explaining the advantage of TiddlyWiki. And the advantage of what we've hypothetically built on TiddlyWiki without scaring people off, without working against ourselves on the competition itself.
This is also not the problem. You give it a different name and explain it. So this is not the problem.
Oh, well, the give it a different name part's fine. The explain it part is the challenge. I think that
but then it's
explaining in a way that doesn't turn the people off, so to speak, might be very difficult given the context of the challenge.
Well, so perhaps we can carve things up into one chunk that we're all agreeing with, is that TiddlyWiki could be a great tool for education in the kind of context outlined by the X Prize. The thing that there's a difference of opinion of, if there's anything, is whether TiddlyWiki would do well in that competition. And I think those are distinct and separate things. TiddlyWiki could be a great thing in that context in education, whilst doing miserably in the competition.
Yes.
If that's all true, going forward, the thing that might be interesting is to think about what we could build, because that's kind of what we're doing here, is getting together to build stuff. that would make it easier to make the case to somebody else that TiddlyWiki was a good tool for education. And I think there was some discussion, well, there's been lots of discussion now about features that we could add, signing, so that the teacher could tell if the TiddlyWiki had been tampered with before the child sat the exams. An area that I'd be interested in is letting the teacher have an ordinary TiddlyWiki layout, and they export the lesson as a TiddlyWiki with a different template that doesn't have a sidebar and so on, but has their tiddlers and content and that kind of thing. So I'm curious that what we should try and pull out of this is things that we could build that would help TiddlyWiki in education. So an addition would be another example of something we don't have at the moment at TiddlyWiki in education.
Yeah, I think one disadvantage I saw is that the competition is made in a way that at the beginning the 18-month development is behind in secrecy, so it's behind locked doors.
Really?
And only if you get $1 million, you have to have all the stuff to be open source. And TiddlyWiki by design is open source already. So our development is open for everyone, and everyone could see what we are doing and could take it to their advantage. So this is the only disadvantage advantage I see, that TiddlyWiki is already open source.
So their assumption is that you need the $1 million in order to be able to afford to make the thing open source.
That's
no,
wild.
I don't think so. but at the moment, as I read, I only did read the HTML stuff, so I didn't read the PDFs yet. But the funny thing is that I think at the beginning you have to build teams, and then you have to sign up for your project or with your project. And then you have 18 months of hidden development. Because otherwise, if everything would be public, everyone could use it. So everyone could use your ideas. So this is the funny part. So
I think given our situation, if we were to approach this, it might behoove us to actually sort of subtly do a bit of both, meaning publicly work things into TiddlyWiki itself that support this initiative, but have the initiative itself be a separate, semi-closed, sort of more quietly, privately managed effort until that time that the submission was actually made. And then I think win or lose, regardless, it would behoove us to open source everything at that juncture.
Yeah. So you can create pull requests for the core if you need this functionality for your project. If it's not pulled, then you have to fork the core anyway. Let's say create plugins that do the stuff for you. But you also could push the core with let's say the public stuff, and the private stuff would be for the challenge. Yeah, right. But as I said, I would be very, very interested to have a team that goes with this. It's really, I think it would be really fun, and it actually would make a difference.
Well, and I would, I'd really like to help make TiddlyWiki great for education. I think you gathered I'm a bit worried that running the competition would just be like corporate life, but I mean, participating in the competition. But doing the software and helping people would be awesome fun. And I guess, I can't help seeing the next actions in terms of things that we do to TiddlyWiki, such as creating a lesson, a learning edition, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I also think so. What's really would be really interesting. So you have to have some tests already with real children. So if they like your UI, if they like the lessons that are done, and I think you have to have gamification. Also, I think who did the first post?
It was Richard, I think.
Yeah, and I think he talked about what is it called, Minecraft type of game. I wouldn't be happy with this because I don't like the pixels. They are too big for me. But yeah, going gamification way I think would be great fun too.
So I just like to add to that. My daughter uses an iPad with a game called Fun Chinese, and she's, they're touching things, they're hearing things, and it is fun. They love it. They love doing it, and it's about images. It's about sounds and music and animation, things like that. I think in this domain, and I guess that then what disappears is the TiddlyWiki bit of it.
I just had this mental picture of somebody wandering around a Minecraft space and encountering a mountain of tiddlers that somebody had dropped there. Just a big pile of tiddlers, not sorted in any way. And using Minecraft techniques, mining the mountain of tiddlers and taking tiddlers out and building structures of tiddlers with them.
I love that.
That represent the interconnection of the ideas in a physical Minecrafty space.
Yeah, this kind of is really, I think, a more general question. I think that it might be worthwhile to add general purpose gamification features or facilities for those sorts of features into TiddlyWiki. A generic model of achievements or points or whatnot for people to use in additions to gamify not just educational materials but anything really.
Mm-hmm. There was something, a little tiny bit of that came up recently where somebody was asking about a random chooser macro, I think was how they'd framed the original question. No, in fact, it was a filter operator. And that did make me think that how useful it would be to have a dice roll widget that could, at the click of a button, choose a random value from a list that you would then use for, and point being that it's exactly.
I think if you have an implementation for a dice roll widget where you have different types of dices, I think then the RPG folks will be back.
Yes.
What about just a very simple? What about a very simple solution of just a random selector filter? A filter syntax that just says.
It turns out because we need filters to be deterministic. Each time they're executed with the same store of tiddlers, they need to have the same result. So, I mean, it's fine. What we can do instead is an action that sets a given tiddler to a value randomly chosen from a given filter. And that, I think, would allow us to do all the different sorts.
Yep.
The other thing I was going to mention was Twine, which I think I've shown before, which is an interactive fiction engine based on TiddlyWiki. I think it's a good example of what we're talking about, in that it's somebody who, well, originally they took TiddlyWiki and they extended it. In fact, they've extended it so far in the most recent versions. I don't think there's TiddlyWiki in it, but until a year or two there was TiddlyWiki in it.
Yeah, but I think publishing is still TiddlyWiki.
Publishing is still a TiddlyWiki, okay. But the people who are authoring interactive fiction within Twine have, it appears, aren't frequently not aware that they're authoring content for TiddlyWiki. They think of themselves as authoring content for Twine, and the subset of TiddlyWiki that's of interest, is quite easy to summarize in the Twine documentation. So I've always thought Twine was a great example, somebody using TiddlyWiki to make a tool for other people. So it's kind of a more focused version of TiddlyWiki, but the users, their users, are the same as our users in that they're using TiddlyWiki to make their own things, which is cool.
What struck me was that you've got. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're.
Something like Dickens Manual, is that not a?
No, I think it's too high level. So we are talking about the target group is about for children from 6 to 12 or something like this.
Yeah.
But I think even in Dickens' space, he, if asked, would be interested in kind of questionnaires that young people might work through on their own. Something I've discussed with them in the past is the idea of a child, a young person, knowing that they're answering the questions in private, that they're not going beyond the browser, and being able to see the result. They get a chance to answer without having to think the consequences of other people knowing how they're answering the questions, that kind of thing.
I did that thing of, I think, well, I think Eric did a lot of it, that questionnaire thing that I did with, you know, look at scale and then gave you answers and things. I think that is something which I think giving values to things, or look at scales or sliders, showing how much you agree with statements. These are kind of building blocks which would be useful for all the TiddlyWiki users as well, I think.
And some of that stuff is so easy. I mean, sliders now are in HTML5. I mean, yeah. So the input element on some browsers will support sliders, and they work in TiddlyWiki too.
Have we got them in TiddlyWiki now?
No, it's something else. Tiddly doesn't need them, so I haven't I haven't done anything about it. But I'll see if I can just find a little. Yeah. Oh, look, I was going to get heavily distracted by that very technical point. Perhaps I should pull back, and we should just close out this discussion in a more sensible way.
Before we do, I'd just kind of like to point out one thing in that we've kind of come full circle in this discussion in an interesting way with Jeremy's mention of sort of a private sandbox environment and the mention of sort of an interactive data environment with sliders or sort of math notebook style thing. You know, what those two things come together to create is an experimental setting. Which in the context of an educational app is a hugely important thing, to be able to give a student a private experimental setting specifically set in the context of their learning work is kind of awesome.
And it's also, as Jeremy said, so that they can, for Dickens use case, they can answer the questions and they see some results, and it's just for their own eyes. So this for nobody else. And I think this gives them confidence that that this is really a value that they can use for themselves. And after a while they can repeat the test and probably get the different result, so that they can measure their advance. And I think this is really important. So there have to be something that is really private. There have to be something that is public. So you can send it back to the teacher so that you get official results or feedback or whatever you need. So there has to be a server-side communication, or there has to be because they, let's say, children need support. But I think the goal is that they can get knowledge on their own, and if they are interested, and if they pass the tests or something like this, they can get new content, and they can learn on their own speed. And if they hack the stuff, that's really fun, because then you know that they are really interested, and they go behind the curtain, and if they really manage to hack it, then they get a certificate, because they don't need to learn to read anymore, because I even would add some more let's say documentation to the core, because you have to read the documentation to be able to hack it. So if you want to learn to read, then that's the goal. And if you want to learn to calculate, and if you can break the chiffre and all this encrypting stuff, yeah, then you are ready for the Nobel Prize. So
Okay, well, I mean, let's leave it that before we can think about entering the competition, we need to have figured out how to make TiddlyWiki a first-class platform for distributed education, and that's the task that there's obviously some joint interest in. Before we move on, I'll just quickly pick up the point about sliders. So sharing my screen, I'm on tiddlywiki.com here. I've created a new tiddler. And as you can see, it's got an edit text widget in it with, that's pointing to a tiddler and the tag input and the type range. And you can see how it's rendered as a slider. And if I go to recent, open something, you can see how as I move the slider, the value of that tiddler changes dynamically. And although I haven't styled it with a class, if I had, I think I can do things like, yes, you can make the sliders big and so on. So that's the sort of thing that we could probably package up a little. And right now, there's no way to be able to set the minimum and maximum parts of the range. So you're supposed to be able to say things like that. Which will require a slight modification to the edit text widget, but would, I think, be worth doing.
And then you still have the problem that if you have two sliders, one for example from 0 to 10 and one from 0 to 12, that the jumping points should be even. So it's similar to the problem that I think it was David Johnston showed us a long time ago with the RPG stuff. So if you have two different sliders, the steps have to be equal. So if you have 10 and 12, and both say, show 3, the button should be at the same position.
So there has to be some value interpolation.
Yeah, so that the stepping has to be done. So there is a little bit.
Yeah, I think that was fairly specific to the problem that David was trying to solve, wasn't it? That he had sliders. I mean, he'd built the sliders. I can't quite remember how he'd built the sliders, but I don't think it was like this, was it?
No, it was a different way. But I think this, there is some tricky parts, but yeah.
But I think the HTML slider, I believe that you can specify a step value. So if we, oops, sorry. If we go in and give it some, if I give it step 10, then yeah, it jumps in steps of 10. So you can set minimum, maximum step size, and I guess that's, I think that's everything you need with the slider, isn't it?
Kind of, yeah.
Okay, so another topic that we had was from Yaka, otherwise known as Armchair Designer. Am I still screen sharing? I'm still screen sharing, it's not bad. Yeah. I had a comment via email from Yaka, a feature suggestion, which was adding inline character, word, paragraph counts. And he mentions a couple of use cases, blog excerpts, Twitter, and he's suggesting that the user could define a standard goal or limit, and then we could provide like a progress bar visualization of how far towards that limit they had got. I could completely agree with that there's I think there's lots of use cases in which word counts particularly are important, and from years of playing around with word processors, I know that word counts are a feature that some writers feel very, very strongly about, and I've seen discussions about confusion about the ways that words are being counted and that kind of thing. The difficulty for TiddlyWiki is technical, really, that if you want to count the number of words in a tiddler, one option would be to look at the source text of the tiddler and count the number of words. The problem with that is that it wouldn't take into account transclusion or the list widget or anything like that. So there may be situations for some people where that's going to be adequate, and that would be the best performing way of doing word counts. But the most accurate way of doing word counts would be to parse and render every tiddler concerned, take the plain text of the rendered output and count words in that. And that's a slow operation, however you look at it. So, and it's, I would think, 10 times slower than the first option of counting the words in the tiddler source text. So that makes me think that the first one, counting the words in the tiddler source text, is pretty trivial, I should emphasize. So that makes me interested in trying to do the other one. But I think rather than being able to continually update the word count, we would have to update it either when a button was pressed or conceivably when an inactivity timer had triggered. And
I think if you don't type for, I don't know, 2 seconds or something like this, there would be enough time. Yeah.
But it could be, I mean, the time to do the calculation could easily get up into the seconds if there's lots of content, which, I mean, just looking at how long it takes, for instance, to render the TiddlyWiki source file, that's very time consuming, doesn't actually do any or does very little parsing and rendering. And one of the things that we learn about TiddlyWiki is that we try to create a wiki that's good for 1,000 tiddlers, and people are immediately using it with 10,000 tiddlers. So that would be the same with the word count functionality.
Jeremy, I do have a question. So now I forgot it.
Well, Nathan's typed a question. Speaking of an inactivity timer, is there something like a TW idle event? No, there isn't. There's any at the moment. The one place where we want to count idleness, I guess, is when we're doing the syncing. So particularly the syncer module waits for a period of inactivity on a tiddler before it transmits the value, before it synchronizes the value. And we do that so that if you do a flurry of typing, there's not an HTTP request for each character. And so I think, yeah, any other code could do the same thing. Yeah, but I would try not to implement a TW idle event as in an event that was somehow circulated whenever TiddlyWiki was idle because of worrying about battery power. I mean, in fact, if you're not the foreground tab, most browsers will stop those kinds of events running. But yeah, but it's closely tied to there's a couple of bits and pieces that I want to do at the moment. One of them is making the relative dates dynamic, and that requires some timer event handling to be integrated into the rendering mechanism, so that basically a widget node can say, if I haven't been refreshed in such and such a time, please refresh me. And that, I think, would be quite useful for some of those idle situations. Not sure. Maybe.
Okay, so I know my question now again. There have been some posts about lazy loading, or let's say loading of images, external images. And I also have seen with the refactoring of the TiddlyWiki 5 repository, there are some bash scripts and one of them is lazy.sh, and I don't exactly know what it is.
Ah,
So I forgot it probably.
well, that's it is quite old,
Yeah.
and I haven't run it for a while, so that makes it fun. So let's go there. It's
So because you also there is a question in the group which has a let's say a problem with images probably, and you said that if I run the node server and have images, it actually the HTML that is transferred contains the images. So I don't understand this mechanism.
sorry. So you're saying you tried to run lazy.sh?
No, I didn't, but I don't know the difference between a standard server call and this lazy server call.
The lazy server. Okay, so the lazy.sh is here, and it's the same as the other server kickoff. The difference is that we point at a different tiddler to be rendered for the HTML file. So if we go in here, we can see that the tiddler that we normally reference in the server command is this one. And it defines a filter that basically includes all tiddlers barring some special ones that it shouldn't include. And then it transcludes TiddlyWiki5.html. So TiddlyWiki5.html is the main template of TiddlyWiki. Somewhere deep within it, around, where is it? Around here, it includes store area template, and that in turn enumerates all the tiddlers that need to be rendered using this variable save tiddler filter. So it's a long way of saying that what this guy does when we render it is renders a TiddlyWiki file whose tiddlers have been filtered past that filter. So the lazy images one, I'm realizing it's actually really difficult to see them with this scrolling. So I'm going to switch over to the editor where it's a bit easier. Bear with me a second. Oh, too many things open. So forgive me. That was the save all. As you can see, gets all tiddlers. Then there's a whole load of minuses to subtract some other things. The lazy images version is exactly the same, except that it excludes all images. And so, in fact, what I said in the ticket is slightly wrong. It means that the images don't even get included in the HTML file at all. So in order to have a quick look at that, if we run the normal server edition and then go to a browser and visit it, there's, I'll now do a Control U to do a view source. We should find Hotter than Jack. There we go. So this is the source of the tiddler motterthanjack.jpg. So it's a base 64 version of that JPEG file. And what you're looking at here is how that has been embedded within the HTML file. And so now we'll go back and run lazy instead. Same thing should happen, and now if we do a refresh, wow. So yes, that has fallen slightly out of sync because it looks like nothing worked there. What was... as you can see, scientifically, I'm just reviewing the differences between those two files. So
have a look at the source.
Well, I can see it's got no tiddlers in it.
Oh, okay.
And that's slightly baffling. Let me just check also that we're not a system.
Yeah, okay, but
I'll have to come back to it then. But Mario,
how it actually behaves, I think, is not really important. But
oh well,
how it
hang on a
should
second.
behave.
Say again, sorry.
So how it should behave is
Yes.
important.
So how it should behave is easier to show you if I run the normal file. That one of the things that you'll notice is when I start up, one of the first things that it does, if we go into the network tab, is ask for the skinny tiddlers. So this is a JSON file that contains the details of all tiddlers except for their text field. So in the situation where you run lazy.sh, it should build the wiki without any image files within it, and so it would, inside the HTML file, it wouldn't even have an empty tiddler with these titles. They will be entirely omitted from the file. Then immediately after startup, it goes and gets tiddlers.json from the server, and at that point it would then get a skinny version, because this only gets the skinny data of all of those image tiddlers. And then at the point where I click on an image, it would make an HTTP request to the server for the JSON of this tiddler, which would then replace its current skinny version with a fat version. So the implications of one of the things that means is if you do lazy loading, you can edit the tiddler, even though it came in late, even though it wasn't baked into the HTML file. It's a proper bona fide local tiddler, and you can treat it as such. So all of that was, that's explaining what lazy.sh is.
Okay. Now I understand it. Okay.
So the advantage is that it keeps your image files out of the HTML file.
So it should be fast loading.
Which means you get reasonably fast loading, but as soon as you start displaying those images, they're still getting sucked into the in-memory TiddlyWiki in the browser, which means
they are real tiddlers.
So what we need to combine that with is the other related feature. So what we just described there is described in a ticket 1000 that I created in response to the discussion. So that's explaining lazy loaded images. External images is where we have a canonical URI field, and that means that when the tiddler is in the browser, it never has a body, even if it's displayed. When it's displayed, we reference it via the canonical URI field, and the browser requests it from the server.
So you can change tags, and you can change description fields or something like this, but you can't change the body text.
No, you'd be able to just edit the canonical URI field. But there would be no user interface for changing the tiddler. And it means that we need a different mechanism for uploading. But in practice, quite a lot of images, lazy loading gets you a hell of a lot of the way there, and it's what I'd recommend for people who are editing TiddlyWikis with lots of images but still want to keep the bandwidth down. And I think externally loaded images is the way to go when you've got when you're distributing read-only material to lots of users.
Yeah, because the request in the group was about that the TiddlyWiki needed about 60 seconds to load.
Yes.
We got it down to 37 now, but it's it's still too much. So.
Yes. Well, I must say I didn't quite understand all the things that you're recommending that he do. I would have recommended that he did lazy loading first of all.
Yeah, but I did forget about it. So.
And then I do think external loading is something that we should fix up, and I've put down here the steps that I think would be necessary for us to support that on the server.
Okay.
So now there's one little tiny thing. I've just changed the export icon, and now slightly have remorse about it. This is the new one. So if I show you on here the existing one, and the reason why I'm doing it obviously is because I'm planning to implement exports first. So that was the old exports icon, and as you can see, it's a kind of distorted version of the save icon with the arrow pointing the other way. But the thing I've just done is this icon, which seemed more logical when I was working on the icon itself because it's download a file. But then when I displayed it in the gallery like this, realized that we're now using this down arrow in these 3 different images in slightly different ways. This is the guy that you see with the upgrade. And the downward arrow is supposed to indicate a drop target in that context. So we never actually show that icon at that size. We show it as quite a big, show it as this whacking great guy. So it's entirely possible that because we're showing it so much larger, that in fact users, wouldn't. I don't think there is any confusion between those two because they're shown in different contexts. But I'm slightly concerned whether this and this are sufficiently similar, because save, obviously the user thinks of as make my changes safe or something, make sure my changes don't get thrown away. It's got the down arrow to reflect the fact that with the HTML5 saver, what you're actually doing is downloading a copy of the wiki. And here, when you're exporting, perhaps you would expect the arrow to go the other way. I tried it with the arrow the other way up, but it didn't seem to help. Anyway, what do people think?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think exporting should be something that points outside. So what was wrong with the first version?
I didn't like it. What I didn't like about it, well, I mean, I suppose I was trying to improve it, and I suppose what I'm saying is I'm not sure whether I have actually. But I thought it was confusingly similar to the save icon. Mm-hmm. And if this is export, then what does that make the letterbox type thing that it's coming out of? Because if save is putting the thing away inside of it, then do you see?
Mm-hmm. I'm just looking at Inkscape, what they have.
Yes, well, the
yeah, but yeah, okay, they have a document with the arrow outside, and the arrow head really is outside the document.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's not really an advantage.
There's some really fancy ones here.
Yeah, and they have save as, which has the disk symbol, so the 144 megabyte disk symbol.
Yes, which really ought to be in TiddlyWiki somewhere, shouldn't it? Another thing I just wanted to spend a moment on that we didn't really get a chance to talk about at the last Hangout, because I did it after the last Hangout, was the addition of audio support. So I'm now shipping TiddlyWiki with 2 examples. One is a tiddlywiki.mp3 file, which is me, and it's like 14 kilobytes or something. So I thought that was reasonable to... is the sound coming through, by the way?
No.
Oh, I wonder how you make it. Well, when you click that, it's Jeremy saying TiddlyWiki. This other one is Caruso singing Ave Maria, which you also can't hear, but which I can hear. And when you look at the source of those 2, the Caruso one has a canonical URI field pointing to it, whereas the TiddlyWiki MP3 one contains primary data
sorry
itself.
for being picky, but does it have the right license to be redistributed?
The Caruso one.
Yeah.
It's off archive.org.
Okay.
I'm not. I'm linking to it. I'm not. I'm streaming it. I'm not reproducing it.
Okay.
But I thought it was. I looked for something old and fun because I thought that would make a better demo.
Uh-huh.
So the thing about the last discussion that reminded me about this is, as you can see, we're reusing the same external images support to now give us external audio tiddlers, and I'm really pleased about that because that canonical URI mechanism, was obviously conceived of as being not just about images, and it's quite nice to have broadened it out so that we're reusing that same mechanism.
What are the next planned steps?
Well, now that there's been a report of quite a bad bug in 5.13, which is kind of interesting as well. If I screen share, I can show you. And so if I start a new terminal, what I'm supposed to be able to do, let me move to my desktop and make the fonts a bit bigger. I'm supposed to be able to say TiddlyWiki, my newest wiki 43, just to make sure that folder doesn't already exist. And I'm supposed to be able to say init server to initialize that as a server wiki. But instead, I immediately get the error that the wiki folder is missing a tiddlywiki.info file. And in fact, of course, the wiki folder itself is missing. And so the problem here is that in 5.13 we introduced that message to give people a warning when they misspelt the name of their edition folder.
Yeah.
The problem here is that this was an overlooked situation in which the system needs to tolerate having a wiki folder that doesn't exist. And that is because of the way that the init server, the init command, I'm sorry, it looks at the wiki folder path name that was provided and creates a folder of that name. So it's very problematical. There were already quite a few issues with introducing this error message because of things like TiddlyWiki version. What's actually going on there is that TiddlyWiki is treating the current folder as the wiki folder by default, and of course the current folder lacks a tiddlywiki.info file, but we don't care because we just want to run the version command. And so the mechanism that I used for fixing this basically said if there was a wiki folder specified on the command line, rather than an implicit default one, as in this example, then raise an error if the wiki folder wasn't loaded. So I'm not quite sure of the right way to fix it.
So I feel guilty a little bit because I raised the ticket.
Well, it's the interconnectedness of all things. It's a little taste of how difficult over the future it's going to be to keep making changes.
There is one thing. If you start the server, just say, I don't know, TiddlyWiki serve something.
Well, I can do that in my other terminal window probably more easily. Yeah.
Then you get the information about, it says starting server at localhost, so the IP address 127 or something like this. Yeah. It would be really nice if you could tell the information also if verbose is on, which TiddlyWiki you actually you are serving. But I think the problem is that the server command which creates the message doesn't know the information.
Oh, it can get at it. It's I can't remember what it's called, but it's it's available inside $TW.
Okay, so this would be really nice, so that we have serving on local, let's say serving XXX on localhost, something like this.
Yeah, no, that would be,
really nice.
easy enough to do.
I couldn't find it, so I would have sent the pull request, but I didn't find it.
I can show you if that's helpful. But no, if you can't find it now that I've told you that, then we'll deal with it on the group. Okay, guys, I must just leave you for 30 seconds. I won't be a second. Hang on. Guys, sorry about that. Is everybody still here? Good. Oh, hang on, let me turn the screen sharing off. Okay, there was any questions or comments from anybody else before I move on then? That was a brief introduction to the audio stuff, which then got sidetracked. Oh no, it's actually in the middle of answering Mario's question, which was plans for the next release. So the reason for showing you that bug was that means that we're going to have to do a 5.14 in the next day or two in order to deal with that. So there won't be a whole heap in 5.14. You can tell by the export icon that export is the next thing on my list. Because that's, I don't think there's any real obstacles to it. It's something that people have been asking for in the groups, and I think it also, done well, it'll show off TiddlyWiki's capabilities quite nicely.
So you are exporting something like a tiddler store that can be imported into other TiddlyWikis?
No, the idea is that there'd be an export button, which you just saw, that would have a drop down of available export formats, and that it would appear in 3 places. It'd be a page control button, which would export all the tiddlers in the wiki. It would be a button on the tiddler toolbar, in which case it would export a single tiddler, and it would also be a button inside advanced search, in which case it would export all of the matching search results. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, cool. But does it export a working TiddlyWiki or just the tiddler store?
So the idea is there'd be a pull-down menu. One of the options would be a working TiddlyWiki. One of the options would be a static HTML file. One would be JSON. One would be a .tid file. I don't think we can do multid files, or I don't think there's a useful context in which we can do those. And possibly not sure what to call it, a skinny TiddlyWiki file, which is an HTML file which just contains the store area div and doesn't contain anything else that's quite useful for importing. So yeah, that's been on my mind for a while, and the plan is to do it in a way that's reasonably extensible, so that people can easily create a tiddler that will cause a new entry to appear in that drop-down list. That is, well, for instance, actually, in the case of the teaching stuff that we were talking about, you could imagine an export button that exports the current tiddlers in somehow as a TiddlyWiki with a different theme, perhaps that hides the sidebar and so on, or maybe even a different template.
And there has also been some discussion in the group about
it's CSV. Eric's just pointed out. I'm so sorry, Mario. You're quite right, Eric. CSV is still an incredibly useful format. Mario, sorry.
Yeah, there has been a discussion about the default tiddlers and probably a drop-down list for create some, for example, tag default or tag pin, and there is already a button which says I don't know, reload the stuff that was open at the moment, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the proposal. I mean, the proposer was at pains to point out that it was a sketch of a proposal, and I don't think it was really something I'd consider at the moment. I think for the reasons other people raised, that it introduces into the core an arbitrary tag, and we try and avoid doing that. We try and have, but also I think its functionality is confusing, because once you provide a pin button like that, it makes people think that TiddlyWiki works in a different way than it does. I understand the desire to avoid people having to look at default tiddlers, and I think maybe there are some ways of coping with the particular use case that was being explored there that doesn't require one to modify default tiddlers. But if you frame the problem as, I want to change the tiddlers that are displayed by default, then default tiddlers is the mechanism. And I don't really see a way of. I was trying to think, if one liked the idea of a pin button, I was trying to think of ways in which it could be done. And you could imagine a pin button that, rather than applying a tag, actually inserts the current tiddler into the right place in the in default tiddlers. But as I'm sure you'll be thinking ahead of me, default tiddlers is a filter, so it's not necessarily possible to insert. You know, if you've got default tiddlers displaying 10 tags, and then you open a new tiddler between some of those 10 tiddlers and then pin it, it's impossible for it to plug it into default tiddlers in the right place. So I did think of one possible variant, which is that you could imagine the pin command actually pinning the tiddler in the above story section, as in pinning it, which would mean that pinning it would be remove all the tiddler paraphernalia, close buttons and so on, and just put its content at the top of the story river. And actually, to me, that seems like quite a useful thing to be able to do. But I think it's not really quite what was being asked for.
Yeah, I also think for me the default tiddlers is always I don't know. I define it once, so I go to default tiddler setting and say tag default, and I'm done. So whenever I want a default tiddler to appear there, then I just tag it default, and this works incredibly well for me. So. And I don't know, I do this when I develop a new TiddlyWiki. Then there are, I don't know, 2 or 3 default tiddlers, and then they stay there for the lifetime of the TiddlyWiki. So there is no need to change them anymore. So at least for me. Yeah?
Yes. Well, it reminds me of something else that we discussed, that the at the moment underneath the default tiddlers box in control panel, there's a button for setting it to that special value, and we talked before, wouldn't it be handy if that was actually a drop down and one could select from a library of useful default tiddlers? And yes, that's certainly
that's what I was asking in the first question.
A similar related user issue is reordering tiddlers in the story river.
Yes, you're quite right.
It's basically the same kind of a concept, whether it's pinned at the top or just I want them to appear in a certain order. And I agree that rather than introducing a new mechanism, it is the default tiddlers mechanism, and that what this guy wants in terms of pinning something not necessarily with the exact control over where it occurs in the pinned sequence, but certainly the idea of pinning can be just done with a button that toggles a tag, and so I don't see the need for any intrinsic functionality there. But similarly, the story list, which tracks the current display, someone said, well, what can we do to rearrange tiddlers? Like in TiddlyWiki Classic, I had a plugin which allowed you to grab tiddlers by their title and just literally drag them up and down the story river. But I think that in TiddlyWiki 5, because there's the story list tiddler, it might be nice if there was a way to drag the tiddler list up, drag and drop that tiddler list to sort it.
Yeah. The plan is to extend the list widget so that it supports drag and drop. And it's complicated because the input to the list widget, again, actually it's the same problem. The input to the list widget is a filter, and yet the thing that you reorder is a list. So, and that's problematical. It means that the way this will have to work is that the list widget would get an extra parameter called list, which would shouldn't be called list, so we have to call it something else, but an extra parameter called list that specifies the list field that should be used for drag and drop reordering. So there would be an expectation that that same list field would be used within the filter to apply the sorting at the end of the filter. So therefore, adjusting this list, this ordering list, would both influence the ordering of the filtered results as well as the list itself. So once that's done, we'd then be able to put drag and drop into a few useful places. It would mean that within a tag, tiddler that was being used as a tag, you would be able to drag and drop to reorder the tiddlers that carry that tag. Again, there's complexities. Some of those tiddlers might have list after or list before fields, and the way that I've just described it, it would be awkward for the list widget to modify those tiddlers, but maybe that's the right way to do it. But it's one of those big jobs that I'll have to be feeling quite optimistic before I start. BJ has done a version of drag and drop, but it doesn't quite do everything that I would like. It doesn't have proper visual feedback during the drag, for instance. And those are that's what makes it tough, is trying to meet people's ordinary expectations from elsewhere on the web and on smartphones of how drag and drop works.
Yeah, I think most users are used to the jQuery drag and drop UI, so yeah, you just would need the information that where to drop the content at the moment.
There's another very quick question. I'd be interested in straw polling the people on this call that's also about drag and drop, which is what made me think of it. A change that I'm mulling over. Sorry, I'm the right browser.
Sorry, there are some questions, or there is one question in the Q&A.
Oh, excellent, excellent. Okay, well this is extremely quick. If I run text edit, okay, get a new document. What I was going to show you is that when I drag a tiddler title outside of the browser to a destination that doesn't understand tiddler format, what you get is the text of the tiddler. In this particular case, it seems to have made it into a hyperlink as well. So that would be true even if I don't know, take one of those tiddlers, I get all of its content. I'm beginning to think that that was the wrong decision, and that what we should actually drag is the title. The reason is partly because during the drag, it looks like what I'm going to be dragging is the title to me. It doesn't look like the text in the preview that we're getting. But the main reason is because if I do something like this, so I type my opening and closing square brackets, then it would be really nice to be able to drag the tiddler title into the wiki, into the text area. But as you can see, if I do that, I get the body text of it. So what do you think, guys? Would anybody miss the old behavior if I changed it so that dragging a tiddler link dragged the title instead of the text?
Yeah, but at the moment we do import with this behavior. So if you drag it from one browser window to another browser window to import it into a TiddlyWiki.
Okay, so when we, in the drag and drop event, we provide an ordered list of formats, and the highest priority format is essentially a JSON format that passes the entire tiddler in full fidelity. So when you're dragging between TiddlyWikis, it'll always use that format. Okay. This is about when you drag to destinations that don't understand that format. So if we look at the code for where we do the dragging, here somewhere, right? You can see here. This is where we add the different types. So we add text VND tiddler with the JSON data, text plain with at the moment the plain text of the tiddler, a URL which is a data URI encoding of the JSON version, and you can see falling back to URL and text, which are, I think, the IE versions. So the change would be that here and here we would be passing, I think it's likely to be title, but let's just check. This too. That's the change, and it wouldn't affect importing between TiddlyWiki documents.
Mm-hmm. I think it would be okay. So for me, it would be okay. But yeah.
What does somebody else think? Does anybody else ever use drag and drop?
Because if you drag and drop the content of a tiddler into a text editor, in main cases you first select the text area that you want to drag and drop, and then you drop only this selected text area. Yes,
exactly. There's already another way of saying that. There's already a way for me to drag the text of a tiddler. All I need to do is to edit it and select it, and then bang, and now it's very clear what I'm dragging. Yes, right. Good. I'm glad you said that. That was rather my logic as well, actually.
Yeah.
Let me unscreen share. Good. Okay, that encourages me to do that. That's part of me thinking about authoring tools. So I think I pointed out at the last Hangout how I find it a little strange that we've got like a dozen view toolbar buttons available and only 3 edit toolbar buttons. And in fact, that's not quite a fair comparison, because some of those view toolbar buttons, like new here and new journal here, kind of are edit related in that they create an editable tiddler. But one of the things that I would very much like is, for instance, autocomplete. And anyway, we've been down this discussion before, and where it ends up is that the kinds of features that we would like to support in the editor are probably best done through codemirror. And at the moment, I'm very aware that we need to upgrade codemirror, and it's a bit of a mare's nest to me, codemirror. It's a big, complicated bit of software that I find every time I pick up, I need to learn more about. But I want to do an update. Still interested in the stuff that you and I discussed before, Mario, about folding in the TiddlyWiki parser so that we get syntax highlighting and so on. But in the meantime, I'm interested in doing as much as I can to improve the edit experience for people who don't have codemirror installed, and that's partly because there are so many environments where codemirror is ill-advisable, like a tablet, for instance. It's a big, complex, heavyweight thing that slows down your browser.
Yeah, there is also one big, it's a disadvantage that search and replace, the browser search and replace doesn't work with codemirror, because it doesn't keep, if you have a long tiddler, it doesn't keep the whole source in the memory. So the that the standard browser search doesn't reach everything.
Wow, yes.
And yeah, but it's an advantage. So if you have a tiddler or a very long source code, I don't know, several thousand lines, it can do the highlighting or a very speedy highlighting.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's why. But yeah, it only keeps a part of the visual elements of the source in the memory. So search and replace, then you have to implement search and replace with the code mirror way. So this is a big disadvantage that I saw with code mirror for TiddlyWiki Classic. So that the browser search and replace doesn't work very well.
Okay, well that's encouraging. What I'm thinking of doing is, well, again, actually, I need to screen share to demo it. But a really frustrating thing is it's not easy to do the really basic thing of a toolbar. If I put this tiddler in edit mode and I select some text, as soon as I try to use one of these toolbar buttons, you can see even without me releasing the mouse button, I've lost that selection. So that means it's not possible for the logic within a button to modify the currently selected text. And that's one of many things that that codemirror fixes. But of course, well, there's easier ways of fixing it than using codemirror. But what I propose is to introduce a keyboard shortcut that, when invoked within a text edit widget, it would bring up it would overlay a kind of drop down of choices that would be essentially the bookmarklet idea that we've talked about before, but in a slightly more dynamic way. So you could, for instance, I could select some text, then press the magic key combination, I'm not sure what that would be, and get a window up that would allow me to select a link and then type the beginning of a name of a tiddler, use the keyboard to select it, and then it would automatically do this to turn the selected text into a labeled link to the target tiddler. So what I'm flagging, what I'm interested in, is a way of encapsulating those little, can't call them macros, but those little bookmarklets, so that they could plausibly work both in codemirror and in the native editor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but then you only have to provide a hook where you can I don't know, call a codemirror function, for example.
Yes, I'm imagining it's just going to take a little bit of care and attention to make it possible.
I think the mechanism would be very similar to the existing mechanism which invokes codemirror. So because there you have the text edit and it calls a function. I don't know if that activates codemirror or something like this.
Yeah, I mean,
but just for
the requirement of one of these things, what did we just call them? One of these bookmarklets. They need to be able to both modify the selected text in the current text box, and they need to be able to present a user interface, so that, for instance, people can do a partial search for an incremental search for a tiddler title, for instance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was thinking for keyboard shortcuts, for example, Control B for bold or Control I for italics or something like this. So they just need to modify the content with no interface. Yeah.
So, okay, I'm with you. So we might imagine there's a bunch of bookmarklets, one of which, this special bookmarklet, the keyboard shortcut allows you to invoke all of the others, including those that have not been bound to a key.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense. Okay, guys. Let's. I think that. You were saying there's some questions in the Q&A panel.
One.
Excellent. Paul Reiber, who's been on the sessions before, is asking to enable his mic. Paul, if you're listening, you I think were watching it as a viewer, and that's why you didn't get a microphone. You need to follow the join link to a slightly different URL in order to be able to join the Hangout. And Paul has a couple of comments. His Vanguard for the Global Learning X Prize. I thought of TiddlyWiki as soon as I saw the contest, and I really hope a core TW team shoots for the prize. I know it can compete and maybe even win. Well, that's very encouraging, Paul. Thank you. It's only going to take a few of us to believe in it in order to accomplish it, I think. The other comments, I think, well, one is about enabling the microphone, and one is a joke about random number generation. So, guys, I think then let's. We've already lost Eric and we've lost Alex as the hours have worn on. So let me say thank you very much to all of you for joining me today. Much appreciated. Very useful session. And I'll press the stop broadcast button now, and then we'll go offline. So bye, everybody. Cheers.
Bye.